We have a special guest today. It is an honor to have our next guest with us. He was with us at Occupy. He was with us against the wars. He was with us at Standing Rock. He was with us at Ferguson. He was with us in Charlottesville. And he is with us for the fight to force the vote for Medicare for all. He's one of the great moral thinkers of our time. Please welcome Dr. Cornel West. Dr. West, it's a pleasure.
My brother, you know I salute you, man. You straight out of Chicago. That means you got a jump start in life, man. and I applaud your artistry, man. As a comic, you putting a smile on Richard Pryor and Lenny Bruce's face. And then you a force for good, telling the truth, keeping the pressure on not just the politicians, but the establishments. Just concentrated power in the Democratic Party or any other party, but it's in the name of the people, man. See, the thing as an artist, you're able to acknowledge your allegiance is actually to the truth and justice. It's not an allegiance to a party. That makes all the difference in the world. That frees you up, man. Frees you up. Richard Pryor was a free man. Lenny Bruce, free. Miles Mabley, free. Jimmy Dore, free.
I feel that way. I appreciate you saying that. I've tried to use comedy to forward progressive ideas my whole life. I was told not to do it by every agent, manager, and club owner I ever worked for, and it paid off. It worked. I got, I was able to create space for other people to do the same thing because I succeeded. I got a couple of Comedy Central specials, and one was an hour, and it got a lot of attention. So I'm glad, and so thank you for recognizing that. But
no, that's very important. With George Carlin, man, we never forget that brother.
Yes.
Never.
No,
ever.
Me neither. Me neither. He inspired me my whole life. So we just elected a president, a Delaware Dixiecrat who wrote the 1994 crime bill that created a racist mass incarceration state, a man who loudly supported the Iraq War, who co-authored the Patriot Act, who fought against struggling families facing bankruptcy, who was vice president when Wall Street banks were being bailed out, but families were being thrown into the streets. Our upcoming president is a champion of the imperial and the neoliberal projects. How do we keep people awake in this era?
Well, we've got to have enough courage and humility, not in the spirit of self-righteousness, but the humility to say that particular candidate, you're talking about Brother Biden, his one positive virtue was he was better than a neo-fascist gangster named Trump. Now that the gangster's on his way out, we have to be just as vigilant in terms of accountability, answerability, responsibility when it comes to Biden and Harris, when it comes to the administration of the establishment of the Democratic Party, because we know it's tied to Wall Street. We know it's tied to militarism. We know that it doesn't want to hit mass incarceration. We know it doesn't want to hit the situation, the plight and predicament of working people, so that Wall Street is still very much in the driver's seat of the Democratic Party, just as it was very much in the driver's seat of the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. We're looking for what do ordinary people, everyday people, working people of all colors, all genders, all sexual orientation, all regions, what will we have? And that's the fundamental question, brother. And that's what you have been highlighting year after year after year. And I salute you for it, man. I really do. It just means, you're going to be misconstrued, misunderstood, attacked, character assassination, and so forth. I mean, I say join the club. They've been coming at me for decades after decades. You got a smile on your face. I got a smile on my face. Because when you're fighting for something bigger than just the next party election or the next position in the establishment, then you got a different kind of freedom, man. Different kind of freedom. America needs more free brothers and sisters of all colors. And it's often been the artists who've been the vanguard in that regard, the musicians and the comic artists. But we need free folk across the board if this democratic project is going to sustain itself, given the very ugly, not just neoliberal, but predatory capitalists and imperial foreign policy in place. I'm talking about that high, thick form of militarism that comes out of the Pentagon, and I don't care what color the head of the Pentagon is. We're talking about moral issues. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For me, as a revolutionary Christian, we're talking about spiritual issues. Human beings being sacred, no matter what country, no matter what color, no matter what gender, sexual orientation they are.
You talk about being a revolutionary Christian. I've always wondered, why isn't every Christian a socialist?
Well, I tell you, most Christians don't want to follow Jesus into that temple and run out the money changers, brother. No, they're on Pontius Pilate's payroll, or they're paying homage to Pontius Pilate. You see, Jesus was crucified because he ran out the money changers. What was the temple? It was the largest edifice this side of Rome. It was a bank. They had police on the one side. For us, it has to do with Wall Street, White House, Pentagon, Hollywood, Harvard, Yale, University of Chicago, all of the elite institutions that accommodate themselves to an unjust status quo. Now, there's individuals inside of those institutions. Because, see, you know, as a Christian, you always recognize every human being is made in the image of God, and therefore they can choose to go another way. You can be a member of the elite and choose to be in solidarity with everyday people. You know, you can be a white brother and choose to be in solidarity with the Black freedom movement. I can be a male, straight. I choose to be in solidarity with my precious trans folk. Those are moral and spiritual choices people make. But generally speaking, the dominant tendency of an establishment when it comes to elite sites, Jesus understood that.
Yes.
They take advantage of the vulnerable. They exploit those who they can exploit, and then get mad when you try to make them accountable, as if it's your fault. You say, "Hey, we just pursuing the truth and seeking justice." Hey.
So that is what it's crazy. I never thought as a comedian, our whole thing is we've always ripped on politicians. They're like the punching bag. And first, all of a sudden right now, it's not allowed anymore. I'm getting all this hate and grief, not because I'm yelling at waitresses or bus drivers, but because I'm yelling at politicians, the most powerful people in the country, if not the world. In the middle of a crisis, I'm yelling. My hair is on fire, so I'm yelling like it is. And people think that's rude. People call you sexist, and you have rage-filled rants, and you're all this stuff. And how am I doing that? I'm at the people who are denying us health care. That's who I'm raging at. Is that wrong?
Exactly. No, brother. You remember that line 24a in Plato's Apology when Plato writes about Socrates. He says, parrhesia, P-A-R-R-H-E-S-I-A, fearless speech, frank speech, unintimidated speech, plain speech, in the face of the powerful. He says, that's the cause of my unpopularity. Now, of course, Socrates was convicted for death.
Yes.
And condemned to death and drank the hemlock. But Aristophanes, one of the great, creators of the comic genre, right? Always cutting against the grain. Critiques of war, critiques of patriarchal power, critiques of economic elites. That's the role of free people who engage in fearless speech, and often it is the artist, and often it's the comic artist. It's just the fact that, like Jonathan Swift, Mark Twain. Look at Mark Twain's critique of imperialism. Look at Mark Twain's critique of capitalism. He was the greatest comic writer in the history of the American Empire, and we haven't got to Moms Mabley yet.
Right.
We haven't got to Moms Mabley yet. She was a great comic artist, and her critique was devastating, even of the black bourgeoisie. Moms Mabley had a critique of, because she knew the black middle class could accommodate itself to establishments and not have the kind of compassion for poor black and poor working class as they moved into the upper echelons of the society. So it's just truth in general is like that, brother.
So how do you explain intellectuals and self-styled intellectuals who always talk about the working class and the poor, but who don't know how working people talk and what their daily struggles are or why they're angry? When will intellectuals stop talking about the working class in condescending ways that make leftist politics repulsive to them?
Well, I mean, part of it is a complicated issue. I mean, the problem is the United States is such an anti-intellectual culture. And so to opt to be an intellectual means you're going to be full of a lot of anxieties and even self-doubts of how you fit in. And so the question becomes then, in order to deal with those anxieties, a lot of intellectuals create little silos that reinforce an elitism, that reinforce an arrogance and a haughtiness and a condescension toward ordinary people. But that's a sign of their insecurity. That's a sign of their own anxiety.
Okay.
You see what I mean? If you're secure about yourself, you don't need to go around putting other folk down.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's true for white supremacists. That's true for male supremacists, right? You and I know. We tell the brothers, you don't need to put any sisters down if you're insecure about yourself. Give up your toxic masculinity if you're really secure about yourself. Well, so it is with intellectuals. Intellectuals create their little internal world to reinforce each other and therefore become tied into that context, and they'll
Yes.
become multi-contextual and connect with others and recognize, hey, there's a whole lot of wisdom outside of the academy.
Yes.
There's a whole lot of insight, whole lot of courage. Now, I've been blessed to teach in prisons for 37 years, so I'm reminded all the time. If I moved from Harvard to the prisons, I'm dealing with some magnificent human beings in both contexts. But one context is tied to the establishment and its dominant orientation, and the other context is dealing with the massive suffering of poverty and decrepit schools and indecent housing and not enough jobs with a living wage and not enough access to health care, which ought to be a fundamental right. And I'm not talking about the lip service of neoliberal Democratic Party folk. All of them talking about health care as a right. Do they really mean it? That becomes a challenge. But I'm trying to generate a little bit of sympathy for the intellectuals, because you see, in America, Americans love intelligence because it generates big cash. But we don't like intellect because intellect raises questions about the basic assumptions of a system. It doesn't just try to fit in the system. Intelligence is tied to success, making it in the system. Intellect, sitting back, raises issues about the system and says, wait a minute, there's an injustice here. There's a deep unfairness here. There's a willful ignorance here. There is a callousness here. There's an indifference here. And Rabbi Heschel taught us what? Indifference to evil is more evil than evil itself. Because indifference to evil creates a whole way of being, a whole way of looking at the world, so you actually don't ever get a chance to see the degree to which you are accommodating to a status quo. That's a different kind of thing. It reinforces the illusion that somehow you're such a force for good. No, we don't want simulacra. We don't want copies. We want the real thing. This is the Ashford Simpson moment. You remember Ashford Simpson? Yes. Nothing like the real thing. Give me something real.
Yeah. Ain't nothing like the real thing, baby. Ain't nothing like the real thing.
Talk to me. Oh, that's Tammy and Marvin.
Wow, that was fun. That brings me back. So we're talking about you and I are joining forces with some other people. We're trying to get this Force to Vote happening, and so there is a forcetovote.org right now. And so what's happening, and it's all brought to even more of a head today because we found out today that Nancy Pelosi did another shifty move and screwed a progressive out of her seat on a committee, and that progressive was AOC. So
Ooh, I didn't know that. Tell me a little bit more about what happened, man.
Yeah, so we're going to cover in a second, but she got shafted out of her committee, the E&C committee. And that Nancy Pelosi did her slate of candidates. She left one spot open for New York, and that was her signal to go. And so who got that? The Blue Dog Democrat got it. The one who threatened not to vote for her got it. What's her name? Rice? The person's name, Rice, who got it? And yes. So it's in my next. I have it loaded into the show coming up next. So she got shafted off that committee she was on. And so now before the argument was that we're trying to get committee seats. Well, now you don't even get them because you played nice. And the person who played hardball got your seat. So now there's no reason. So what we're proposing is that the progressives in Congress, there's now like real progressives, like members of the squad. There's like 7, 8 of them. That's all we need to stop Nancy Pelosi from becoming speaker again. And so they should demand that Nancy Pelosi agree to a Medicare for all vote in the middle of a deadly pandemic before we give our vote to her. And if she doesn't do that, then someone else is going to become speaker. That's how you play hardball. That's how the person who just got AOC's spot on that committee, that's how she did it.
Kathleen Rice.
So that's who got...
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, Kathleen Rice got her spot. So now, what we're telling people to do is go to forcetovote.org and sign our petition. And so the idea is very simple. The simple is they have the power to hold their vote for Nancy Pelosi as speaker until she agrees to bring Medicare for all. Some people, there's a lot of things. People say it won't pass. I want to see people vote against health care in the middle of a deadly pandemic and a depression. I want to see Democrats do that because they're not going to do that. And if they do that, then we run on it in 2022, and then we get Medicare. So the whole point they keep saying is that it's never the right time for a vote for Medicare for all. Is it, Dr. West? class is there's some magical time in the future. They don't know when it's coming, but it's never coming. It never is going to come. How it happens is you create space for it to happen by forcing politicians' hand. Isn't that what you do?
Oh, that's how you put that pressure on, though, brother. We demand the right to vote, as Sister Marianne Williamson says, and absolutely right. That demanding that right means you're bringing tremendous power and pressure to bear to keep politicians accountable. But what happens is that you can imagine, a number of our progressive brothers and sisters of all colors who are in the Democratic Party recognize that they're between a rock and a hard place. Because if they have allegiance to the corporate wing of the party, if they have allegiance to the neoliberal elites in the party, then they can't hold on to their progressive sensibilities, their progressive policies. If they're too progressive, then the neoliberals and the establishment Democratic Party come down on them and push them further to the margins. And we're simply saying, we come along and say, we are free of our allegiance to the Democratic Party establishment. We're free of our allegiance to Nancy Pelosi. We can speak the truth. We can bear witness to a justice. And most importantly, we can make sure that our fellow citizens across the board, in fact, have a recognition of their humanity and decency by having access to health care. Vast majority of our fellow citizens support it. Majority of Republicans even support Medicare for all.
Yes.
So this is not some kind of subversive operation that we're trying to promote as if we're part of a lunatic fringe. It's just that big pharmaceutical companies, those big insurance companies, they've got a stranglehold. In the same way corporate power has a stranglehold on the flow of public policy. And that needs to be disclosed, that needs to be revealed. And that's one of the roles that we have, brother. And I don't want you to ever get discouraged. I'm not going to get discouraged bringing this power and pressure to bear. Sometimes it has a chance of a snowball in hell. We do it because it's right. We do it because it's just. We do it because we have a caring concern for the vulnerable folk. And sometimes it looks like we're going to win. We do it, we win, but we don't stop. We remain as vigilant after our victory as before, because we got a long way to go before we get a chance to affirm the dignity of our fellow citizens, especially poor and working class citizens, no matter what color, no matter what state agenda.
So AOC advocated for causing a ruckus and making people uncomfortable inside the Democratic Party. That's what she said. And how do we make people more comfortable with making politicians uncomfortable? Because a lot of people are uncomfortable doing that. What do we do?
That's a good question. Ooh, we know it's just by example. It's by example. We're the kind of creatures, we human beings, that we would all rather see sermons than hear sermons, which means that we have to exemplify what we're talking about. We could act like we're so critical all we want in the abstract, but if we don't come through with our bodies, with our energies, with our clout, with our whatever gravitas we have, with our authority, then people know we're just talking. Mm-hmm. And so, you as an artist, give your all. This is an example. Myself, as a writer, I give an example. This is where I want to go, and this is what I'm willing to put on the line. And it's by examples. Now, of course, it's not isolated individuals. That's what movements are all about. When we have a whole wave of folk coming together, lifting their voices. I come from a people, black people, our anthem is what? Lift every voice. It's not lift every echo. Most of our politicians are echoes. Most of them are tied to big money. Mm-hmm. Most of them tied to the flow of cash. Most of them concerned about their next election. Most of them concerned about recognition. No. Those are the echoes. We're talking about voices. Democracies are predicated on voices. That's what jazz is all about. You find your voice. You never heard Charlie Parker tell anybody to find your echo? You never heard Sarah Vaughan say, find your echo to Dinah Washington? She said, find your voice, girl. Because I got my voice. And Sarah got a voice. So it is in life. You find your voice. It's like your fingerprint. It's all yours. It's going to go with you when the worms get your body. But when you're alive, lift your voice out of courage and compassion such that you can bring pressure to bear on status quos. And this is just one way of doing it. Here we have to bring pressure even on our progressive brothers and sisters. We want to get them to see that even though we know they represent the best of a Democratic Party, that party itself has a certain rot at the center of it. And that's corporate power, that's big money, and it reinforces an arrogance and a haughtiness and a condescension thinking that they can say and do. Look how Brother Biden talked to the civil rights leaders the other day.
My
Did you hear that?
God.
He talking to them like they children, like somehow they just have to kowtow and be deferential to him. And they sat there and took it.
And they took it.
Wait a minute, they took it. Can you imagine John Coltrane turning over in his grave? I lifted my voice to talk about love supreme, as justice as a form of love in public, and you sit there and take that. It's the tone. It's the way in which you go about something, let alone the content. You see, and that's what we're talking about. You see, once you get adjusted to that way of being in the world, you just open to the highest bidder. You just for sale. And we live in a society in which everything's for sale, everybody's for sale, and that reinforces depression, that reinforces people's sense of paralysis and powerlessness. And we say, no, we just coming off the largest protest move, the demonstration in the history of the country this summer. People were raising their voices. We're going to keep that momentum going. And Brother Dore's going to do it in his Chicago-like, comic, powerful, visionary smile. I'm going to do it in my chocolate side city orientation here at Harvard, and we are in this together, my brother.
ForcedToVote.org. Go to ForcedToVote.org. And we also, we want you to go there, sign our petition, pass it around. It's to let these people know how much power they actually have, because they have a lot of power right now. They have a lot of leverage, and this isn't the only time that they're going to have it. But this is the most important time right now that they have it. And if we don't get this Medicare for All vote, it might not be till 2025 before we even get another chance. So there's never a wrong time to do the right thing, and now is the time. In the middle of a deadly pandemic, there's never a better time to have a Medicare for All vote. Don't listen to people gaslight you saying that this is a bad time, we have to wait, or I'm not the right, or the right people aren't pushing it. Well, here's now Dr. Cornel West is signed on. Justin Jackson is signed on. There's lots of people signing on. In fact, Movement for a People's Party is you're joining the advisory council, right? Movement for a People's.
Oh, my dear brother Nick Brown, indeed. I'm blessed to be on that advisory council. We've got to break the back of this two-party duopoly. Both of them tied to Wall Street. Both of them tied to big money. Both of them tied to Pentagon militarism. Look at how both parties vote for the military budget. Now, thank God, Brother Bernie's calling for 10%. That's very important. Barbara Lee is concerned about it. But see, those are still just voices in the wilderness. Voices in the wilderness. And as you know, Brother Dore, that, I'm just a little small part of the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. What did Martin Luther King Jr. talk about? The ways in which militarism, racism of any kind against black folk, against brown folk, against Jews, against Catholics, against Arabs, against Palestinians, against Ethiopians, against Guatemalans, racism of any kind, poverty. Thank God for William Barber. Thank God for Sister Thea Harris and the Poor People's Campaign. And then militarism, then materialism, which is a spiritual condition, brother. And this, as an artist, you understand the role of the spirit. You see, once materialism sets in, so many human beings are willing to do anything for carrots, anything for money, anything for inclusion, anything for a pat on the back. So Martin Luther King Jr. understood all four of those, sucking the energies out of democracy. And that's my tradition. And I'm going to be faithful unto death to that tradition, brother, just like you're going to be faithful unto death to the legacy of the great comic artist, man.
And we're just joining forces to get people some Medicare for all. And
absolutely.
And if not now, when? If not here, where? If not me, who? And so that's what we're doing. We're doing everything we can. We're trying to raise pressure. Politicians don't do anything unless they're pushed. Politicians don't do anything that's hard unless you push them. And I'm encouraging all the other independent media progressives to rake them over the coals and make them afraid of you, not know that they can count on your protection. They need to be afraid of you. Just like FDR said, who was the greatest progressive president ever, said, hey, you got to make me do it. I agree with you, but you got to make me do it. So we got to make them do it. So we got to make them afraid not to do it. We can't pretend. Politicians are not our friends. I cannot stress this enough. Politicians are not our friends. When Bernie says that Joe Biden is his good friend, that is not true. Joe Biden will throw Bernie under a bus in a second. He does it every 5 seconds. And right now, he's denying him the Department of Labor spot, right? Bernie was pushing for the Department of Labor spot, but sources say that Bernie is willing to settle for a go fuck yourself as usual. So
Your point about FDR is very important here, brother, because as you know, he himself and all of his progressiveness refused to break the back of Jim Crow in the South, the American apartheid system in the South. Why? He told A. Philip Randolph that. Make me do it. We didn't have forces strong enough to break the back of Jim Crow. So we go from 1932 all the way up until 1944 and 5. Doing what? Still locked into Jim Crow, as he's also generating some progressive legislation on other fronts. Can you imagine Medicare for all having to wait decade after decade, the way black people had to wait to break the back of Jim Crow because we didn't have enough people who made politicians do it? Mm-hmm. What a parallel.
Yes. I mean, America.
First time is tragedy. Second time, deeper tragedy involved.
So what I'm saying is Americans have been tolerating healthcare injustice for 100 years now. Have Americans been in a prison by an indefensible healthcare system for so long that they can't even imagine being free? Is that a problem?
Well, I think part of it is, though, man, we can never underestimate the power of these pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies. You saw what happened to Brother Barack Obama. You know, he punted on second down, spineless, no backbone. They're all coming in talking all this talk about everybody's going to have access to health care. And he and Rahm Emanuel and others. Now, that's part of your Chicago connection. That's the other side of Chicago, that they just caved in so quickly because they wanted something. And what did they do? They adopted the Heritage Foundation Republican model that Romney had already established in Massachusetts. They cast it on a national level. They did, in fact, allow for $20 million, no doubt. That became a bigger market for the pharmaceutical companies, for the private insurance companies, and millions still had no access, as is the case now, and still tied to employment rather than being citizens. So here again, Woody had a major opportunity, missed opportunity, and here they still breakdancing as if that was some great, magnificent progressive legislation. I say, get off the symbolic crack pipe, please. We were born at night, but not last night. Jesus. We have a love for poor people. We're following Jesus into the temple. Run out those money changers. Disclose that greed. Lay bare that indifference. That's what we do as brothers and sisters who are concerned about working people.
Now, you talked about Barack Obama and the promise that wasn't met of Barack Obama, and people don't even know what his record was. People don't know that he made the banks bigger. They wanted him to break them up. That he made the Bush tax cuts permanent. He made sure the bankers got their bonuses while he kicked 5.1 million families out of their homes during a similar economic downturn. He opened the Arctic to drilling twice. He built those cages that those immigrants were put in. He'd gas immigrants at the border. He deported more Hispanics than all the presidents combined since 1890. People have no idea that this was his record. And he took us from 2 wars to 7. And they did Libya, and he dropped more bombs. And they ran out of, Barack Obama dropped more bombs than George Bush. So I could go on and on like this all day long. But now his vice president is in charge, Dr. West. Now, how do we keep the left from going back to sleep and not being awake for all the crimes that we know are coming? And he's going to start at least 1 or 2 more wars.
No, and we should add, of course, those drones, man.
Yes.
Brother Bush dropped 45 drones on folk, and those were war crimes. Brother Obama dropped 563 drones on folk, including innocent folk like Bush. Those are war crimes. With a Nobel Prize in peace, okay. Those are war crimes. Same is true at AFRICOM in Africa, and the expansion of that. And the assassination of American citizens without due trial. I mean, Republicans, libertarians, you don't kill people you have political disagreements with. I disagree with the Klan. I don't believe in going out killing the Klan because I have state power. Well, these people are terrorists. Klan's terrorists too. You don't do that. if you're concerned with rule of law, you see. But of course, we have to acknowledge now, Brother Barack Obama, he's brilliant, he's poised, he's got a magnificent wife and magnificent kids. And as the highest level exemplar of Black success in a white supremacist society, it was hard to criticize him. That's why I was consistent, because I know Black folk.
Right.
I know Black people who are saintly. I know Black folk who are gangsters. We're human beings like everybody else. And from a moral and spiritual point of view, I'm just trying to tell the truth. So a lot of Black folk didn't want to say a word because he represents Black success. And it is. To be president of the U.S. empire is the highest level of Black success ever experienced in the country by anybody. But I'm not about just success. I'm about greatness. And my Bible tells me he or she is greatest among you will be your servant. My Bible tells me he or she who aspires to the highest level of moral and spiritual excellence will be he or she who's willing to tell the truth the way you've been trying to do. Bear witness to justice the way Martin and Malcolm and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and John Coltrane and Curtis Mayfield and Nina Simone. We can go on and on. Gil Scott Heron. Those are the ones who are great. Not the successful ones. You can use your success for greatness. That's different. But if you're successful and then accommodate to militarism, can't say a word about poverty, don't hit mass incarceration, side with Wall Street, the meeting where he says, I stand between you and the pitchfork. That's what he told 13 heads of Wall Street in March of 2009.
Yes.
I stand between you and the pitchforks. I want you to know I am with you. I will protect you. How many Wall Street executives went to jail? Not one. But let a working class
Right.
brother and sister, especially on the chocolate side, get caught with drugs, they're going straight to jail. You see, so he reinforced the words. It's no accident you got a Black Lives Matter movement under a Black president, Black attorney general, and Black Homeland Security cabinet secretary. All that Black formal power didn't translate into enhancing the lives of precious Black folk on the street, on the block. That's why we put pressure on politicians, Brother Dore. That's why it's important for you to keep raising your voice. If you got to shout, shout. You got to sing a song, a little Ashford and Simpson, sing a little Ashford and Simpson. If you got to crack your beautiful jokes that you do, crack those jokes. Use whatever gifts you have to make sure you are focusing on the least of these.
Well, I really appreciate your support. I appreciate your eloquence and your moral leadership. It's amazing. I'm really honored to have you on. I want to remind everybody we're joining forces with a movement for a People's Party. We are forcetovote.org. So if you go right there, forcetovote.org, there it is. Go to forcetovote.org, sign the petition. There's going to be more people coming out, letting you know that they're on board for this. More people that you know, more people that are in the spotlight, more leaders and activists who are going to be coming out, joining with Cornel, joining with me, joining with Nick Brana, Justin Jackson. We're all coming together to push this right now because there's a moment right now that could happen. And if in the middle of a deadly pandemic, this is the time for a Medicare for All vote. And in fact, all we're doing is pressuring the people who ran on getting this to do it. And they can do it right now. So I really think this can happen. I really do. This is how you create moments. And you think this, I mean, you've seen way more than I have. You think this could happen, right?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And you see, the thing about history is so mysterious. It's so unpredictable. You never know what's going to be the catalyst. Who would have thought that it'd be Brother Floyd that would be the catalyst for that kind of magnificent response here and around the world? You never know. You just keep fighting. You keep bearing witness, and you keep being true to the best of who you are. Keep your integrity and love at the center of it. And then, boom, it takes off in an unprecedented way.
Well, let's fingers crossed. I want to say thanks again for coming on. This has been great. You're welcome on the show anytime, and I look forward to working for you to try to get people some health care. Dr. Cornel West, thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic.
I salute you, my brother. Salute you, my brother.
Thank you. Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.